Have you ever imagined reaching the peak of wealth and power, only to see it all crumble due to a single mistake? In the tragic fate of Crassus, the richest man in ancient Rome, you'll discover how Crassus, the man who built a wealth empire, made a fatal error that led to his downfall. If you've ever wondered how poorly calculated decisions can change someone's destiny or even destroy what was built with so much effort, this story will resonate deeply with you. In this documentary, we reveal Crassus's mistake, the same kind of error many of us fear making in the pursuit of success. But we're not just here to talk about tragedy. We'll show how to identify these mistakes before it's too late and what we can learn from Crassus' rise and fall to avoid watching our own dreams unravel before our eyes. Marcus Licinius. Crassus was one of the most powerful and wealthiest men Rome had ever known. Imagine someone so rich that he could buy practically anything he wanted. He accumulated gold, land, and property, and used his wealth to gain even more power. But at the same time, his story did not end with the success and glory he desired. In fact, Crassus's fate was very different from what he imagined. Crassus was born into a very old and influential Roman family, the gens Licinia. His father was an important man who had held high-ranking positions such as consul and censor, giving the Crassus family special status in society. From an early age, he was groomed to be a great leader, learning about politics, military strategy, and how to form powerful alliances. It seemed he was destined to be one of Rome's greatest. However, life in Rome was full of conflicts and power struggles. At the time, Rome was divided between two political groups, the populares, who supported the people and sought reforms, and the optimates, who aimed to maintain power in the hands of the aristocracy, the wealthiest class. Crassus and his family were on the side of the optimates, but this would put them in a dangerous position. When Crassus was about 28 years old, a leader named Gaius Marius, who supported the populares, seized control of Rome by force. During this power grab, Crassus' father and brother were killed, and the family lost all their properties. Crassus was forced to flee to save his own life. Have you ever tried to understand the wars that made Rome the greatest empire in the world, but got lost in all the confusing details? If so, you're not alone. Imagine finally mastering the key details that shaped Rome, learning the strategies of great generals like Julius Caesar and Scipio Africanus, and understanding how these maneuvers changed the course of history. Understanding the difficulty of finding this information, I have made my digital book, The 10 Battles That Shaped the Roman Empire, available. You will have access to all of this in a clear and straightforward way. Learn how Rome won impossible battles, discover curiosities you won't find anywhere else, and become an expert in Roman military history. Click on the pinned comment and get it now, as our copies are running out. Continuing the story of Crassus, he ended up hiding in Spain, where his family still had some land. And it was in this moment of despair that Crassus began to rebuild his life. Despite having lost almost everything, he was a smart man and took advantage of the few connections he still had to gather allies and begin to recover his fortune. Crassus knew that to return to power, he needed a good opportunity. That opportunity came when the general Lucius Cornelius Sulla, another leader of the Optimates, returned to Rome to regain control of the city. Crassus quickly allied himself with him. With Sulla's victory, Crassus not only regained the properties he had lost, but also found a way to become even richer. Sulla began a process called proscription, where political enemies were declared traitors, had their lands confiscated, and were often executed. Crassus saw this as an opportunity. He bought these confiscated properties at very low prices, impressively increasing his fortune. Not stopping there, Crassus devised a peculiar strategy to make even more money. He created his own fire brigade, but they did not put out fires for free. When a fire began consuming a house or building, his men would rush to the scene and offer to buy the property. If the owner agreed to sell, Crassus would order the fire to be extinguished. If they didn't, he would let the place burn. In this way, he managed to buy valuable properties at rock-bottom prices, further increasing his wealth. Over the years, Crassus became the richest man in Rome, but despite all his money, there was still something he lacked: military glory. In ancient Rome, being a great general and winning victories on the battlefield was what truly brought respect and honor. And this was the kind of recognition Crassus still sought. So, in 53 BC, Crassus made a decision that would change his life forever. He decided to lead a military campaign against the Parthian Empire, a powerful nation in the east. Crassus believed this campaign would be his big chance to win the glory he so desperately desired. He gathered a huge army, confident that the strength of his Roman legions would be enough to defeat the Parthians. But Crassus underestimated his enemy. When he crossed the Euphrates River, he encountered a smaller but much more strategic Parthian army. The Parthians had two major assets: heavily armored cavalry and mounted archers who were incredibly agile and accurate. These archers used a tactic the Romans were not familiar with. They would ride at high speed, firing arrows while retreating, always staying out of reach of Crassus' troops. Crassus's army was unprepared for this tactic. The battle quickly became a nightmare. The arrows of the Parthian archers rained down on the Roman soldiers, who were unable to defend themselves. Crassus's son, Publius, made one last desperate charge with the Roman cavalry, but he and his men were surrounded and killed. The loss of his son was a devastating blow to Crassus, both emotionally and militarily. With his army in ruins, Crassus attempted to negotiate a peace deal with the Parthians. However, during the negotiations, he was betrayed and killed. To mock Crassus's greed, the Parthians, according to legend, poured molten gold into his mouth as a symbol of his obsession with wealth. The death of Crassus at the Battle of Carrhae not only ended his pursuit of glory, but also deeply shook Rome. He had lost thousands of soldiers and tarnished the empire's prestige, which until then had believed in the invincibility of its legions. Crassus's humiliating defeat served as a reminder that not all the wealth in the world could save someone from disaster when ambition crosses the line. This channel was created to reveal the true history of Rome, clearing away myths and distortions that often obscure its grand achievements. Make sure to remember the name and image of this channel so you can always return to this reliable source amidst so many others that don't provide the precision and details that Rome deserves. Now make sure you've subscribed, because here you'll find meticulously researched and presented facts about one of the most influential civilizations in history. Marco Licinius Crassus was born into a family that seemed to have everything one could want in ancient Rome. He was part of the gens Licinia, an aristocratic family, which meant that his ancestors had wielded great political and social influence for many generations. Growing up in this environment gave Crassus a certain privilege that few people had. He wasn't just an ordinary Roman boy. He was educated from a young age to become a leader, someone who would one day make great political decisions. From a young age, Crassus watched his father, Publius Licinius Crassus, hold high offices in the Republic, such as consul and censor. For those unfamiliar, being a consul in Rome was like being one of the presidents of the city. Rome had two consuls at a time, and these men were responsible for leading armies, approving laws, and making crucial decisions for the future of the empire. The role of censor was another position of great importance, responsible for maintaining order and moral customs in Rome. Crassus grew up watching all this, meaning that his education wasn't just about reading books or learning to count money. He was taught to think like a leader, to understand political struggles, and how to hold on to power. He had the best teachers, learning about military strategy, oratory, the art of public speaking, and the importance of having powerful allies. From a young age, Crassus knew that the political game in Rome was complex, full of intrigues and betrayals. He also knew that to survive and thrive, he would need to master these arts. The education he received prepared him to face any challenge, or at least that's what he thought. But although he was born into a wealthy and influential family, Crassus's life wasn't all about luxury and power. He grew up in a time of great turmoil in Rome. While he was learning about politics and power, the political scene in the city was ablaze. The city was divided between two powerful groups: the populares, who supported the people and wanted reforms to improve the lives of the poorer classes, and the optimates, who defended the aristocracy, the rich elite, the group to which Crassus and his family belonged. This division led Rome into a series of civil wars. The leaders of both sides fought for control of the city, and this fight wasn't just a political squabble, it was a real war, with bloody battles, executions, and persecutions. Crassus's family, who supported the Optimates, directly suffered the consequences of this war. When Crassus was only 28 years old, one of the greatest tragedies of his life occurred. A leader named Gaius Marius, who sided with the Populares, managed to seize control of Rome by force in a military coup. The city was taken over, and everyone who supported the opposing side was persecuted. This included Crassus's family. His father, one of the greatest defenders of the Optimates, was captured and executed. Crassus's brother was also killed, and the family's properties were confiscated. Suddenly, all the privilege that Crassus had seemed to crumble. Imagine what it must have been like for him to see everything his family had built destroyed in an instant. He was a young man with a bright future ahead of him, but now his life was at risk. Crassus had no other choice but to flee. To save his own life, he escaped from Rome and went into hiding in Spain, one of the empire's provinces where his family still owned land. This period was one of the most difficult times in Crassus' life. He went from a life of luxury and power to exile, needing to start from scratch. But this was where he showed that he wasn't just a privileged young man. Crassus had learned to be a strategist and to form powerful alliances. Even far from Rome, he began to rebuild his fortune, gathering allies and creating a base of power. This phase of Crassus' life was crucial in shaping the man he would become. He had already experienced significant losses and understood that if he wanted to return to Rome and reclaim his rightful place, he needed to be smarter, more cunning, and above all, more ruthless. Let me know in the comments if you knew this part of Crassus' story, and if you have any interesting facts to share about him. Imagine being at the height of your youth, surrounded by wealth, power, and influence, only to see it all collapse in an instant. This is exactly what happened to Marcus Licinius Crassus. One moment, he was the heir to one of Rome's most powerful families, the gens Licinia. The next, he was fleeing for his life after the brutal execution of his father and brother during the bloody civil wars that ravaged Rome. The city, once a symbol of greatness and conquest, had turned into a battleground where friends became enemies and alliances shifted like the wind. Now alone, Crassus had to make a quick decision: flee. There was no way to fight, no way to reclaim what had been lost. His only chance for survival was to escape Rome and seek refuge in a far-off land. And that's exactly what he did. His destination? Spain, one of the most distant provinces of the empire, where his family still held some land. Now picture this: a young man who had spent his entire life surrounded by comfort, suddenly finding himself in a foreign land, without the power that once protected him. But Crassus wasn't an ordinary man. He wasn't going to sit idly by and wait for fate to resolve his problems. In Spain, he began to hatch a plan. The same shrewd mind that had prepared him for power in Rome now guided him towards something even greater. Crassus knew that to return to Rome and reclaim what he had lost, he would need allies. And not just any friends, he needed powerful people who could help him rise again. So using what remained of his influence and cunning, he began to form a network of alliances. He got close to local leaders, won the trust of those who still remembered the Licinius name, and slowly started building a base of power. Even far from Rome, he ensured that his name remained relevant. But Crassus had another talent. He knew how to make money. Even in exile, he managed to rebuild his fortune. In Spain, he leveraged the land his family still owned and turned it into profitable ventures. He bought, sold, and negotiated. Every coin he earned was one more step towards the comeback he so desperately sought. It was further proof that even in the most desperate situations, Crassus always found a way to turn adversity into opportunity. It was during this phase of his life that Crassus learned one of the most important lessons. Power doesn't just come from titles or inherited wealth. True power lies in the ability to adapt, to form alliances in unexpected places, and to never give up, even when everything seems lost. And so, after years of exile, Crassus was no longer just the young heir who had fled Rome. He had become a calculating, strong, and determined man. He rebuilt his fortune and, more importantly, he was ready to return to Rome and claim the position he believed was rightfully his. If you're enjoying this content and feel that these stories of Rome are helping you better understand the empire that shaped the world, don't forget to leave a like. Not only does it help spread the true history of Rome to more people, but it also ensures that YouTube shows you more videos like this one. So give it a like and strengthen this journey of historical discovery. After rebuilding his fortune in Spain and forming valuable alliances, Marcus Licinius Crassus knew that his opportunity to return to Rome was drawing near. He was not the kind of man to sit back and wait for luck to fall into his lap. Crassus was always attentive to any political movement that could benefit him. And then, the chance he had been waiting for arrived. Lucius Cornelius Sulla, one of Rome's most powerful generals, was preparing to return to the city to reclaim control from his rivals. Sulla, who also belonged to the Optimates, the Roman aristocracy, had been exiled, but now he was marching back to Rome with his troops. Crassus, ever the strategist, saw that aligning with Sulla would be the perfect way to restore his status and regain power. He knew that if he supported Sulla and Sulla won, he stood to gain immensely. And that's exactly what happened. Crassus joined forces with Sulla without hesitation. He brought his own resources, alliances, and most importantly, his relentless ambition. Together they marched on Rome, and after a series of battles, Sulla emerged victorious. With the city back in his hands, Sulla became dictator of Rome, which meant he had absolute power over the city and his enemies. It was then that something decisive happened. Sulla initiated a brutal process called proscription. Now let me explain what proscription was. Imagine a list of names, not just any list, but a list of people whom Sulla and his allies considered traitors or enemies of Rome. These individuals were marked as targets. If your name was on the list, it meant you could be killed without consequence, and worse, all your properties would be confiscated. Sulla used proscription as a way to eliminate his political opponents while simultaneously rewarding his allies. Those who helped him during the campaign could benefit greatly from this process. And this is where Crassus comes into play again. He wasn't just a soldier at Sulla's side, he had a keen eye for opportunity. When Sulla began confiscating the properties of the proscribed, Crassus saw a golden chance. While many focused on eliminating their enemies, Crassus had something far more ambitious in mind. He wanted to increase his fortune. Taking advantage of the chaos and tragedy that proscription caused, Crassus began buying up confiscated properties at extremely low prices. These properties, many of them in Rome, were sold for next to nothing since their former owners were either dead or in hiding. Crassus, always strategic, acquired land and real estate as though he were at a massive auction, rapidly expanding his wealth. What truly set Crassus apart, however, was his ability to turn these properties into something even more valuable. He didn't just buy and sell, he knew exactly how to make the most of his acquisitions. His investments were careful, and his wealth grew at an impressive rate. In no time, Crassus wasn't just a rich man who had recovered his lost land. He was one of the richest men in Rome. And here was the true genius of Crassus. While many other Romans fought solely for political power, Crassus understood that real power lay in controlling resources, land, and property. He knew that with a gigantic fortune, he could not only influence his allies, but also steer the very direction of Roman politics. With Sulla's victory and the proscription, Crassus didn't just regain what he had lost in the past. He went far beyond that. He emerged from this phase of Rome's history as one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the city, always keeping a close eye on the opportunities that arose in times of crisis. He had learned that in the Roman world, chaos could be a path to success, as long as you knew how to play the game. And don't forget, make sure to get your digital book 10 Battles That Shaped the Roman Empire. It's crucial that you get it now before the units sell out. And about Crassus, the game was just beginning. Crassus created a private fire brigade and used fires to negotiate properties at low prices, further consolidating his fortune. Marcus Licinius Crassus, already known for his financial acumen, came up with a brilliant and somewhat cruel idea that would earn him even more wealth. In ancient Rome, fires were a serious problem. Most houses were made primarily of wood, and with narrow, crowded streets, even a small fire could spread quickly, destroying numerous buildings. At that time, Rome had no public fire department. If someone's house caught fire, there was no one to help. This is where Crassus saw an opportunity. He decided to create his own fire brigade. Initially, this might seem like a noble gesture, something that would benefit the city. But Crassus's real motive was far more cunning. Here's what he did. When a fire broke out somewhere, his men, who formed his private fire brigade, rushed to the scene. But they didn't immediately put out the fire. First, they made an offer to the property owner. Crassus would offer to buy the house or building that was on fire, but at an absurdly low price, exploiting the desperation of the owner. If the owner accepted the sale, Crassus's firefighters would put out the fire and save the property. But if the owner refused, Crassus simply let the building burn to the ground. It was a ruthless tactic. Often in panic and with no choice, people accepted Crassus's offers, selling their properties for a pittance just to avoid losing everything in the fire. This allowed Crassus to purchase valuable real estate in Rome at extremely low prices. Then, as always, he used his intelligence to restore or resell the properties, further increasing his wealth. This scheme enabled Crassus to accumulate an impressive amount of land and buildings in Rome. He practically dominated the city's real estate market, always finding ways to capitalize on the misfortunes of others. Though his tactics might seem cruel, they demonstrate just how determined and relentless Crassus was when it came to expanding his power and wealth. So, while many saw fires as disasters, Crassus saw them as business opportunities. Little by little, he became not only the richest man in Rome, but also one of the most feared and respected. He was a master at turning any situation, no matter how chaotic, into an advantage for himself. In the end, this ability to always find a way to win is what truly made Crassus such a powerful figure in Rome's history. And don't forget, make sure to save the name and image of this channel so you can always return to this reliable source amidst many others that don't deliver the precision and details that Rome deserves. Now check if you've already subscribed, because here you'll find rigorously researched and presented facts about one of the most influential civilizations in history. Returning to the story of Marcus Licinius Crassus, already the richest man in Rome, he saw his chance to achieve something that money alone couldn't buy: military glory. At that time, Rome was terrified by a revolt that seemed impossible to stop. An army of slaves led by Spartacus, a gladiator who had rebelled against his masters, was ravaging Italy. These slaves weren't just desperate people fleeing, they were defeating Roman legions, something no one expected. Imagine the impact of that. Rome, the most powerful city in the world, being challenged and humiliated by slaves. It was a nightmare for the Romans. The Senate had no options left, and they needed someone who was not only brave, but also had the resources and determination to end the rebellion. That's when they chose Crassus. Crassus knew this was his great opportunity. If he were the one to defeat Spartacus, he would earn something he always wanted: military respect, which would place him on the same level as other great Roman leaders, like Pompey. He accepted the mission and went to battle with a force of about 40,000 soldiers. But Crassus was not just any commander. He knew the situation was dire and that he needed to be ruthless to defeat Spartacus. As soon as he took command, he restored discipline in his troops with extremely harsh measures. One of these was reviving an ancient and cruel Roman military practice called decimation. This method involved punishing legions that fled or showed cowardice on the battlefield. Crassus had his soldiers kill one out of every 10 of their comrades as punishment. This brutality, though terrifying, restored fear and obedience among his troops, who had been shaken by previous defeats. After reorganizing his army, Crassus began to surround Spartacus and his army of slaves. He was smart enough to avoid direct confrontation without being fully prepared. Knowing Spartacus was a clever leader and that one mistake could lead to another defeat, Crassus devised a meticulous strategy. He built fortifications, a literal line of walls, to trap the slave army in southern Italy and prevent them from escaping. Spartacus tried several times to break through the siege but failed. Over time, hunger and exhaustion began to weaken the slave forces. When the final battle came, Spartacus and his followers, though fighting bravely, were completely defeated by Crassus's legions. The rebel army was annihilated, and Spartacus died in battle, though his body was never found. What followed next was one of Crassus's most notorious and cruel actions. He wanted to send a clear message to anyone who dared challenge Rome again. So he ordered the crucifixion of around 6,000 slaves who had survived the battle. Imagine this scene: 6,000 crosses lined up along the Appian Way, the main road connecting Rome to southern Italy. Each cross was a brutal reminder of Rome's power and the consequence of any rebellion attempt. These crucifixions were not just punishments, they were a warning. As Romans traveled along that road, they saw the crosses and knew that Crassus had restored order in an implacable and brutal way. For Crassus, this victory brought him the military prestige he so desired. Not only had he crushed the rebellion, but he had also established himself as one of the most powerful men in Rome. The story of Crassus and his victory over Spartacus is a reminder of how, in ancient Rome, power and brutality went hand in hand. Crassus wasn't just a wealthy man, he was a ruthless strategist who used every means at his disposal to secure his position of authority. In doing so, he left a bloody and unforgettable mark on Rome's history. And remember, whenever you have doubts about the history of Rome, you can grab your digital book, 10 Battles That Shaped the Roman Empire, through the pinned comment. Get it before the units run out. Marcus Licinius Crassus, already the richest man in Rome, was not satisfied with just his fortune. He wanted something more: military glory, the kind of recognition that Julius Caesar and Pompey, his allies in the First Triumvirate, already had. The Triumvirate, a secret alliance between Crassus, Caesar, and Pompey, gave each of them a share of power in Rome. While Caesar was charismatic and Pompey had great military victories, Crassus used his vast wealth to fund campaigns and maintain the balance among the three. His money, for example, helped finance Caesar's conquests in Gaul. But for Crassus, this was not enough. He wanted a great military victory that would earn him the same respect as his peers. And with this desire, he decided to launch a campaign against the Parthian Empire in the east. He believed that defeating the Parthians would make him a hero in Rome's eyes. Confident, with an army of 50,000 soldiers, Crassus marched on, underestimating the enemy he was about to face. However, the Parthians had a very different combat strategy. Their army consisted of mounted archers, agile warriors who attacked and retreated quickly, always out of reach of the Roman legions. In the Battle of Carrhae, Crassus saw his forces gradually being decimated by these tactics. His soldiers, unable to reach the archers, began to lose morale. Publius, Crassus's son, attempted to save the situation with a bold attack, but was surrounded and killed in battle. His son's death was a devastating blow to Crassus, both emotionally and militarily. He lost not only his heir, but also control over the battle. Desperate, Crassus tried to negotiate with the Parthians to save what was left of his army. However, he was betrayed and killed. The final humiliation came when the Parthians, according to legend, poured molten gold into Crassus's mouth, a cruel joke about his greed. The defeat at Carrhae was a disaster for Rome, and Crassus's death broke the balance of the First Triumvirate. Without him, the rivalry between Pompey and Caesar escalated, leading to civil war and changing the course of Roman history. Crassus, who sought glory, found only a tragic death and a legacy of greed and poorly calculated ambition. His story serves as a warning about the dangers of seeking more than life offers, even for the most powerful. So if there's one thing we learn from Crassus's story, it's that even as the richest man in Rome, he made a grave mistake. He underestimated the enemy and thought that money and power would guarantee him everything, including the military glory he so desired. In the end, his ambition led to a humiliating defeat. It shows us that sometimes, no matter how much you have, it's crucial to be cautious and not let pride or greed take over. And whenever you want to know more about Rome in detail, you can grab your digital book, 10 Battles That Shaped the Roman Empire, from the pinned comment. Our units are limited, so get yours today. If you enjoyed this story and want to keep learning more about Rome and its legendary figures, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave your like. See you next time.